The door was still swinging when I stepped inside. I hadn't even said a word yet, hadn't even closed it behind me. I just stood there, in the entryway, holding my phone, watching the little arc of motion as the pantry door slowly rocked open and shut like it had been rushed closed a second too late. Nobody noticed me. Not right away. The music was too loud. The smell of oven-heated appetizers still hung in the air. A couple of guys were arguing about fantasy football near the kitchen sink, one of them halfway into a six-pack. Everything seemed normal. If you just glanced, you'd think this was just another Saturday night housewarming party with half-drunk people and cheap wine. But I wasn't looking at the room. I was looking at her shoes. Celeste's heels were on the floor, just barely visible from where I stood, peeking out under the pantry door like a clue left behind by someone who didn't think they'd get caught. My stomach dropped. My mouth went dry. And still, I didn't move. I didn't have to open the door, because someone else did it for me. Trevor, the guy who owned the house, stepped out first, shirt untucked, cheeks flushed, breathing fast like he'd just run a mile. He froze when he saw me. His smile died on his face. And then he looked away. Didn't say a single word. Just brushed past me like I was furniture. Like I didn't even exist. That was the moment I knew. But somehow, my body still moved toward the pantry. I don't remember walking. I just remember the sound of the hinges creaking as I pushed the door open. Inside, under that harsh little ceiling bulb, Celeste was adjusting her blouse, staring at the floor like it might swallow her. She didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. She just sighed and said, "It didn't mean anything." And maybe that was the worst part, because I hadn't even asked yet. It didn't mean anything. Those were the first words out of her mouth. No apology, no panic, no explanation. Just that flat, tired sentence like we'd been married for 30 years, and this was just another Thursday. I stood there, staring at her in that tiny pantry, surrounded by bags of chips and dusty wine bottles and a half-used pack of red Solo cups. That's where she chose to destroy me. A glorified storage closet between the microwave and the recycling bin. I should have shouted, demanded answers, slapped the wall, something. But instead, I whispered, "How long?" She blinked, like the question confused her. Then she said, "Tonight wasn't planned." That answer hit harder than any confession. Because if it wasn't planned, that meant it was impulsive, instinctual, which somehow made it worse. It wasn't the result of an affair built on months of resentment and distance. No, it was just easy, natural, like the idea of betraying me barely required thought. I stepped back. My hand hit the frame of the door, and I leaned on it, suddenly lightheaded. I heard people laughing in the living room again. Someone cheered. A cork popped. The party was still going, oblivious to the wreckage happening just feet away. I looked at Celeste and saw her fixing her hair in the reflection of a microwave door. That's what she was doing while I stood there breaking. She was brushing stray strands of hair behind her ear like she was getting ready to rejoin the fun. "You kissed him?" I asked, though I already knew. Her lipstick was smeared just enough. Her shirt slightly off-center. She didn't answer. So I pushed again. "You kissed him, and then what?" That made her look at me. Not with guilt, but irritation. Like I was the one being inappropriate. She crossed her arms and said, "I don't think you want the answer to that." I swallowed so hard it hurt. She was right. I didn't. But I didn't need to leave. Right then, I needed air. Space. A reality check. As I turned around and headed toward the front door, something inside me cracked. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just this hollow snap in my chest, like a rubber band that had been stretched too far for too long. I was halfway down the porch steps when someone grabbed my arm. It was Trevor, and he looked terrified. "Please don't tell anyone," he whispered, his hand still gripping my sleeve. "It'll ruin things. For both of us." That was the moment I realized. This wasn't just some dumb, heat-of-the-moment mistake. This was planned, and I wasn't supposed to find out. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. He said it so casually, like they were partners in a crime that had just gone slightly off-script. Like he expected me to be reasonable about it, to nod and keep the secret for the greater good of whatever twisted friendship they thought we had. Trevor still had his hand on my arm. I stared at it for a long second, my chest rising and falling. I think he thought I might hit him. He flinched when I pulled away, but I wasn't angry. Not in the explosive way he expected. I was still, dead still. That kind of frozen silence that makes people uncomfortable. I asked him one question. "When did it start?" He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked away. That told me everything. It had started long before tonight. Maybe weeks, maybe months. Who knows how many office drinks turned into staying late, turned into this. Hiding in pantries at parties while I stood outside answering phone calls about brake pads. I left without saying another word. I walked down the street, past the cars lined up along the curb, past the condo lights, past the guy vaping on the sidewalk who didn't even notice me, like I was invisible. Just a man walking away from his own life. I drove around for an hour. No music, no destination, just silence and headlights and the occasional scream of my own voice inside my skull. At one point, I pulled over next to a gas station and sat there with the engine running, my hands clenched around the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. The worst part wasn't the cheating. It was the way she looked at me when I saw her. Like she'd already let me go. Like I was the old coat in the back of the closet she couldn't bring herself to throw away, until Trevor made her feel brave enough to do it. I ended up back in our driveway sometime after midnight. The lights in the living room were still on. Her car was there. I just sat in mine for a few minutes, watching the windows. No movement. I walked in quietly. The house smelled like her perfume. A note was on the kitchen counter. Handwritten. Can we talk tomorrow? I didn't want it to happen like this. Like this. As if there was ever a clean, decent, respectful way to blow up a marriage in someone's pantry. I went to the guest room and locked the door. Not because I was afraid of her, but because I didn't trust myself to speak without shattering. I lay in bed, fully clothed, eyes wide open. Every sound in the house felt exaggerated. The hum of the fridge, the creak in the floor above me, the ticking of the old wall clock that had once belonged to her grandmother. All of it felt like background noise in a horror film where the real danger hadn't revealed itself yet. But it would, because the next morning, I found something in her phone that changed everything. And that's when this story really began. The sun was barely up when I woke. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of this hazy limbo where I kept reliving the moment that pantry door swung open. Every time I closed my eyes, it replayed like a looped clip I couldn't stop. Her shirt off one shoulder. The way she didn't even look surprised. The way Trevor slipped past me like I was a coat rack. But what really stuck with me, what I couldn't shake, was the note. I didn't want it to happen like this. Like she had a preferred version of betrayal lined up in her head, and I'd interrupted it by walking in too soon. When I finally dragged myself out of the guest room, I didn't expect her to be gone. But she was. Her keys were missing. Her perfume still hung in the air. She'd even made coffee for herself. No message. No follow-up. Just a silence that felt deliberate. Strategic. Like she wanted me to marinate in the fallout before she said anything else. I wandered into the kitchen, aimless, then noticed her phone sitting on the windowsill by the sink. She never left her phone unattended. It was practically welded to her hand. And yet, there it was, unlocked, screen cracked in the corner, charging cable still barely plugged in. I stared at it for a long time. I wish I could say I hesitated, that I respected her privacy, even now. But I didn't. I picked it up, heart pounding so loud it felt like it was echoing inside my ears, and started scrolling. Nothing stood out at first. The usual stuff. Group chats, shopping apps, photo galleries full of food pics and mirror selfies. Then I opened her text messages. That's when things started to unravel faster than I could process. There weren't just messages to Trevor. There were messages to someone else. A name I didn't recognize, Lance. And these weren't just flirty texts. These were explicit. Videos. Voice notes. Jokes about me. My cooking. My job. My insecurities. The exact things I had only ever shared with her during our most vulnerable moments. And then I found a thread called The Plan. I wish I was making this up. Inside it were messages between her, Trevor, and this Lance guy. 3 of them, mocking me, plotting, coordinating the reveal, laughing about how I'd probably cry like always. Screenshots of my texts to her, labeled needy and cringe. A photo of me at the last Christmas party with the caption, "The husband pillow." I dropped the phone. Literally. It fell onto the tile floor, face down. I didn't even check if it cracked more. My hands were shaking. My mouth dry. I sat down on the cold kitchen floor and just stared ahead for what felt like forever. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. Engineered. Shared. Laughed about behind my back by people I'd let into my home. People I thought she respected. Maybe even loved. The part that haunted me the most wasn't the cheating. It was that she never once defended me. Not in any of the messages. Not even a hey, maybe don't say that about him. Nothing. I wasn't just cheated on. I was dehumanized. Turned into a running joke by the one person I trusted to guard my softness. When she came home that evening, I was still in the kitchen. She looked at me, saw the phone on the floor, and her eyes went wide. Not with guilt, but fear. And right then, I knew something even darker. She hadn't planned on staying married at all. Not even for the sake of saving face. This, all of it, was just the beginning of her exit strategy. When she walked back into the house that night, she wasn't wearing guilt. She wore convenience. Like the whole day had simply gotten away from her. Hair still neat. Makeup fresh. Grocery bag in one hand like she'd just come from a normal errand. She stopped when she saw me sitting there on the floor. For a second, her eyes darted to the phone, still face down where I'd dropped it earlier. And that's when the wall between us fully collapsed. You looked through it, she said. No shock. No apology. Just fact. I didn't speak. She set the bag down. Slowly. Carefully. Then leaned against the counter and crossed her arms like we were starting some negotiation. Like this was mediation, not devastation. Okay, she finally said, exhaling. I know it looks bad. You were planning it. My voice cracked mid-sentence. You were all planning it. Like it was some kind of performance. She blinked, but didn't argue. Just stared. My throat was so tight it hurt to breathe. Was any of it real? I asked. Anything between us? Or was it all just some long-running pity project? Still silence. I stood up slowly, my knees stiff. You told them about my anxiety attacks. About my therapy. About the panic meds I take. You turned my breakdowns into memes. I didn't post anything publicly, she snapped, like that detail mattered. They're not monsters, Lowell. It was just venting. You know how stressed I've been. That word, venting, rattled in my head like a gunshot in a locked room. I stepped closer. You weren't venting. You were mocking. You were dismantling me piece by piece, handing out blueprints to people who laughed while I held your damn purse in elevators and made excuses to your mother about why we weren't pregnant yet. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other. And then, in a tone I will never forget, low, measured, almost bored, she said, I outgrew you, Lowell. That's the truth. You were comfortable. Safe. You made me feel taken care of for a while. But I need more. I need someone who challenges me. I swear I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Someone who challenges you. I said, nearly breathless. Like Trevor? Like Lance? The guy who thought Minneapolis was a country? That's not fair. No, I cut her off. What's not fair is building a marriage on a man's softness, encouraging it, praising it, then turning around and calling it weakness when you're done with him. She actually had the nerve to roll her eyes. You always take everything so personally. That line, that single line, it flipped a switch I didn't even know I had. All of this is personal, Celeste. You didn't cheat on a mannequin. You didn't humiliate some faceless stranger. You destroyed the man who would have done anything for you. And the worst part is, you did it knowing I'd blame myself. Knowing I'd lie awake wondering what I did wrong. There was a long silence after that. Maybe 10 seconds. Maybe a lifetime. She looked at me with a face that finally showed a sliver of truth, and it wasn't regret. It was fear. Not of me, but of the version of me that had stopped begging. I grabbed the phone off the floor, walked past her, and headed for the front door. Where are you going? She called after me. I paused without turning around. I'm going to show this to your parents, I said, and then to my lawyer. I didn't slam the door when I left. That would have meant I still wanted her to feel something. But the truth is, I didn't care if she did anymore. I didn't go to her parents first. That was a bluff. A good one, judging by the sudden voicemail I got from her 20 minutes after I left. Her voice cracked in it, trying to sound calm, asking me to please don't make a scene, followed by a sudden shift in tone. Colder, warning me not to embarrass us both. That little switch, the way she tried to guilt me back into silence, that was all I needed to hear. She still thought I was playing defense. She still thought I was the same man who cried in the parking lot after our first real fight and brought her flowers 2 hours later. But something inside me had changed the moment she told me she outgrew me. Those words had been echoing through my skull all day like a siren in a tunnel. She didn't just cheat. She stepped on my neck and called it growth. And if I was going down, I wasn't going down silently. I drove straight to a little cafe I used to work at in college. No reason why, just instinct. Sat in the back corner, ordered a black coffee I wouldn't drink, and opened her phone again. I went back through the message threads, screenshot after screenshot, folder after folder. I saved everything. Not for revenge porn, not to go nuclear. I had no interest in destroying her career or reputation. But I was going to dismantle the mythology she'd built about me. The private group chat where I was the emotional barnacle. Saved. The joke where they said, Lowell probably asks permission before sneezing. Saved. The meme of my face photoshopped onto a toddler in a baby carrier. That one hurt the most. I saved that too. And then I did something I never thought I'd have the stomach for. I called Lance. I didn't know what I was going to say. I just hit the number and waited. 1 ring. 2. Then a confused voice. Hello? I kept my voice steady. This is Celeste's husband. Silence. Then the sound of him exhaling hard, like someone just threw a cold bucket of water on his head. I didn't know she was still with you, he said quickly. She said you two were separating. I smiled without warmth. Yeah, she says a lot of things. He didn't hang up. Interesting. Look, man, I didn't know. I'm not calling to fight. I cut in. I'm not going to threaten you. I just want to know one thing. What? How long have you two been talking? He hesitated. 3 months. Maybe 4. So that was it. She'd been building this exit for nearly half a year. Trevor was just a bonus. A warm-up act. I thanked him and hung up. Then I drove to my brother's place on the edge of town. We hadn't talked much in the last year. Celeste always said he was a bad influence, too impulsive, too cynical. But when he opened the door and saw me standing there with a backpack and swollen eyes, he didn't ask anything. Just stepped aside and said, stay as long as you want. That night, while I lay on his old futon, I opened my laptop and began writing a long letter. Not to Celeste, not to her family, to mine. I told them everything. Not to shame her, but to reclaim my own dignity. I wasn't going to be the guy who disappeared quietly while rumors filled the space I left behind. I detailed the affair, the texts, the group chat, the memes, the pantry. I wrote it all down, plain, brutal, true. Then I sent it to my parents, my 2 cousins, and my godmother. 5 minutes later, my mom called me in tears. Lowell, baby, come home. I had no intention of staying broken. If she wanted to burn everything we built, fine. But I was taking the blueprint with me, so she couldn't rebuild the same lies somewhere else. And when I returned to the house to collect the rest of my things, I didn't go alone. I brought someone with me. I didn't go back to the house with anger in my chest. I went back with intention. That's different. Anger is reckless. But intention? That's surgical. Precise. I wasn't there to scream or demand closure. I didn't want closure. I wanted clarity and my belongings. My brother came with me, not because I needed backup, but because he didn't trust me to walk back into the same 4 walls where my life had been quietly dismantled. When we pulled into the driveway, the place looked exactly the same, like the universe didn't get the memo that this house was now a crime scene in slow motion. Her car wasn't there, which I'd hoped for. I still had my keys. She hadn't changed the locks. That was her first mistake. I walked through the living room and saw the coffee mug she used every morning still sitting in the sink. Her shoes by the door. A half-eaten granola bar on the counter. It was like she hadn't expected me to ever come back. Like she truly believed I'd just evaporate. Upstairs, I packed quickly. I moved through the bedroom like I was pulling the soul out of it. Unplugging my lamp, grabbing my side of the closet, collecting the books she used to roll her eyes at. My brother stayed in the hallway, respectful, quiet, watching me like I might crack at any second. And then, I opened the nightstand drawer on her side of the bed. I don't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe that same small masochistic voice that told me to open the pantry door at the party. I just wanted to see who she really was when I wasn't looking. At first, it was normal stuff. Gum, receipts, hair ties, a nail file. But then, tucked underneath a folded receipt from a department store I didn't recognize, I found something that didn't belong. A small, leather-bound notebook. Old, worn at the edges. I almost put it down, assuming it was a planner or a dream journal. But something about the weight of it stopped me. I opened to the first page and froze. My name was written at the top, underlined twice. What followed wasn't a diary. It wasn't even private thoughts. It was a log, page after page. Entries titled things like Lowell's anxiety flare-up, 03/17, or argument about dishwasher, my reaction strategy. She'd been documenting me, dissecting my emotions, cataloging how she responded to them, grading her own performances. One entry read, "He cried again. I nodded and hugged, but didn't validate. He stopped faster. That works." My hands went ice cold. This wasn't venting. This was manipulation as a hobby. I flipped to the back and found a section titled Exit Plan, Emotional Distance Timeline. Bullet points. Week by week. It started months ago. Little things like stop holding hands in public, reject physical intimacy twice per week, blame stress at work, and finally, escalate distance to trigger detachment, then exit with minimal guilt. I nearly dropped the book. This wasn't just cheating. This was psychological warfare. I sat down on the edge of the bed. My heart wasn't even beating hard. It was steady, cold, silent. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even betrayed anymore. I was studied. And that felt worse than any affair. My brother walked in and saw the expression on my face. "What is it?" I handed him the book. Let him read one page. Just one. When he looked back up, his jaw was clenched. "You're not staying here another hour." He helped me carry the last box down the stairs. As we locked the door behind us, I realized something. This wasn't my house anymore. It had become a controlled environment. A lab. And I was the subject she experimented on until she could detach cleanly. But what she hadn't accounted for was that I'd find the notebook. And I wasn't going to keep that discovery to myself. I didn't confront her. Not in person. Not in a screaming match. Not in some dramatic showdown like she probably expected. I didn't throw the notebook in her face or post it on social media or email it to her boss, though part of me wanted to. That part still lives in the basement of my heart. But I've learned that not every truth needs to be shouted to be heard. Instead, I packed that little leather-bound book in a small box, along with her note, the one she left me the night of the party, and a printed copy of one of the screenshots she thought she deleted from her messages with Lance. I left the box on the dining room table. No message. No letter. Just the evidence, silent, undeniable. Then I left my house key next to it. That was the last time I ever stepped foot in that house. I moved in with my brother for 2 weeks while I found my own place. A small apartment near a walking trail. Quiet. Clean. Nothing fancy, but it felt like mine. Every time I turned the lock on that door, I felt something in my chest loosen. Not because it was safe, but because it wasn't shared. Word got around faster than I expected. Her parents reached out. Said they were shocked. Said they had no idea. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they just didn't want to. I didn't ask. I was done doing the emotional labor of trying to make sense of other people's denial. She texted once. Just once. 3 days after I left the box. "You didn't have to be cruel." That was it. No apology. No ownership. Just that. As if my silence had hurt her more than all the things she orchestrated behind my back. I didn't reply. And that, I think, was the moment I finally won. Not by getting even. Not by exposing her. But by refusing to need her reaction to heal. I stopped writing mental drafts of what I'd say if we ran into each other. I stopped waiting for closure like it was a bus that might eventually show up if I just kept standing in the rain. Instead, I went back to therapy. Started journaling. Picked up boxing, believe it or not. I still get winded way too fast, and I look ridiculous in gloves. But there's something satisfying about punching a heavy bag after a decade of emotional suppression. Last weekend, I sat on a park bench with a real cup of coffee, not the burned office stuff I used to live on, and watched 2 strangers walk by holding hands. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel that ache in my chest. I didn't think, why them and not me? I just thought, I'm getting there. Healing isn't dramatic. It doesn't come with fireworks or applause. It comes slowly, quietly, like waking up one morning and realizing you forgot to check if they viewed your story. Like laughing at a dumb meme without wondering if she would have found it funny too. Celeste wanted a performance. She wanted chaos, an explosion, a bitter ending that let her feel justified in walking away. I didn't give her that. I gave her nothing. And from that nothing, I built everything else back.